to fight for liberty. Well, there was these two brothers. They were named John and Frederick, and they were both pastors. They were Lutheran pastors. And Frederick was very much about, let's just go on for Jesus, just stay with church stuff and ignore politics. You may want to ignore politics, but politics is not going to ignore you. However, John Millenburg, he says, no, we need to be involved. And so with that, he preached a sermon one day from the book of Ecclesiastes chapter 3. And that's the chapter that says there's a time for this and a time for that. And he preached this and he says there's a time to preach and there's a time to cease from preaching. There's a time to fight and that time is now. And he took off his clerical robes, those long black robes that they all used to wear, and he had an army uniform of the Continental Army. And he says the time to fight is now. Who follows me to Boston? He pointed to the back, they opened the door, and there was a boy back there with a drum. And he barged out and he says, who follows me to Boston? Because he had heard about the Boston Massacre where the British had massacred a bunch. 300 men of John Muhlenberg's church marched out that day. And he became a colonel in the Continental Army. If you look at the giant painting that I'm sure you've all seen it before, go home and look it up. It's the surrender of Cornwallis at Yorktown. And you'll see there's Cornwallis and Washington in the center. There's the Brits over here, the Americans over here. The fourth guy in on the horse is John Muhlenberg. And if you actually go to the United States Capitol today, and they won't let you in because the People's House is bound to the people. It's just like Kentucky. It's called the People's House, and English here says the people can't go to the People's House. Oh, you can go to Kroger by the thousands in a day. You can go to Walmart by the thousands in a day. You can go to Walmart by the thousands, but you can't come in this gigantic Capitol building because you've been around me and you can influence things. I just thought I'd throw that in for free. Now back to your sermon. If you were able to get into the United States Capitol, they have an area that is called Statuary Hall, where they have different famous statues. And you will see one of them has a statue of a man, and it has Muhlenberg written on the bottom of it. And you'll see over one arm, he has draped his clerical robes. And on the other hand, he's holding a sword. Muhlenberg. And of course, his brother Frederick, he said, no, we don't need to participate. Until one day, Frederick Millenburg went back to his church and found that British soldiers had moved into it. They had eaten all the crops of the church around the building. They had let loose all the livestock. Drunken soldiers were singing on the church organ, and drunk ones were passed out in the pews. And when they got done, they left and they burned the church to the ground. At that point, Frederick Millenburg said, maybe the church should be involved. And so he decided, you know what, I am going to get involved. I'm going to run for office. A pastor ran for office. And he became the very first Speaker of the House of Representatives. When the Bill of Rights was written, because remember, the Constitution was great, but it didn't protect freedom of religion, freedom of speech, or anything. So they made an amendment, the Bill of Rights, the first 10 amendments. You know, we have 56 people signed the Declaration of Independence, and we had all the states sign the Constitution. Only 2 people ever signed the Bill of Rights. One of them was Frederick Millenburg, who was still a full-time pastor. And the other one was John Adams. And let me tell you the story of why. All right? No, I'm sorry, James Madison. James Madison, not John Adams. James Madison. Because they wrote the Constitution, but the state of Virginia didn't like it because it doesn't protect freedom of religion. And so you know what happened? We had a pastor named John Leland, who was a Baptist preacher like me. And he says, I don't like the Constitution, it doesn't protect freedom of religion, and I say we don't ratify it. And if Virginia doesn't ratify it, the whole thing falls apart. It had to have all 13 colonies. And so they got all the other preachers mad, and they got all the other people mad, and the United States was about to fall apart, and it was about to be just 13 independent countries. And then James Madison, father of the U.S. Constitution, goes to this preacher, John Leland, and says, hey, you're being involved in politics. Why don't you like the Constitution? He says, it doesn't protect freedom of religion. Without it, you don't have me. He says, I promise you, preacher man, if you'll give your support in the other churches, I'll make an amendment, and the first thing you'll say is freedom of religion. And the preacher took the politician at his word. And because of that, Virginia ratified the Constitution, and a United States was founded. The only reason that you have a Bill of Rights, the only reason that we have the United States is because preachers and Christians got involved. And the only 2 people signed the Bill of Rights. James Madison, who made the promise to the preacher, and Frederick Millenburg, who was a preacher. The revolution was started from the fire and cry for liberty in the pulpits. The country was founded and the Constitution and the Bill of Rights was made because Christians got involved. And if anything is going to be done to change this massive socialist takeover, it's going to be because Christians and churches say, you know what, we're the ones who started freedom and we're the ones that's got to bring it back. So, that is my little 20-minute dissertation on Christians not only can be, but should be involved in politics. Questions?
I think he'd make a good pastor.
I serve currently as the chaplain to the Kentucky State Capitol. I've done that for 12 years. I'm an evangelist, and so I'm usually invited at different churches to come out and to preach a special service. They usually have me in. We did one last Sunday night, we're doing one this Sunday night. And I talk about America's Christian heritage. If anybody would like me to do that at their church, just come see me later. I'll give you a card, have your pastor contact me, and I'll be happy to come.
I need that card.
Okay. So, this is how you get a hold of me.
Chaplain.
I don't charge anything for it. If they want to take up a love offering afterwards, then that'll be great.
I live in Ohio.
Have Bible, will travel. Any other questions about what we talked about tonight, and then we'll talk about other issues?
How can we get you to speak in the public schools and kind of, to the students?
I would love to speak to the public schools. What I love to do is talk about the biblical basis of our Constitution, and I will take you through article, paragraph, and sentence of the Constitution. And then I show you where it comes from, book, chapter, verse. And I can do that for an hour. Actually, I've got 2 different lessons on that. One on the Constitution, one on just the Bill of Rights. So I've done that at all kinds of venues across the state, a few out of state. If you find someone who'd be willing to let me come out, I will be more than happy to do it.
First, they have to teach them some history and that there is a Constitution.
Right, because right now they are not being taught about it, and that's been going on for a long time. They're spending a whole lot of
Do you
time
know
teaching
Sean
them
Silver?
socialist policies and nothing about American history, and they sure don't want to teach you about the Declaration and Constitution because it mentions God so many times.
Yep.
I mean, right in the Declaration of Independence it says, all men are endowed by their Creator, with a capital C, proper name with certain inalienable rights, that among these are life. Why the Supreme Court says it can't find the right to life anywhere is beyond me. I found it. It's right in the Declaration of Independence. All right? They end the Declaration by saying we are appealing to the Supreme Judge of the world for the rectitude of our intentions, and with a firm reliance on the protection of divine providence, we mutually pledge to each other our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor. They said, God, all of our rights came from you. We're appealing to you. We're relying on you. We have nothing, and we're facing the world's superpower, and only by you will we be able to work. Same prayer today.
Yeah.
We have no army. All I have is people who crave freedom, and we rely on you. You have not because you ask not. Let it start here, and let us start pleading for God's hand to move forward. Yes, sir.
When are you going to open the doors and tell us where we need to be and how we need to be? That's what I want to know.
What we need to do right now is I'd say 3 phases. 1, we need to continually educate and communicate. We've all come and we hear what's going on in these type meetings. We need to get more people to these. If you're able to just bring one other person, I think maybe we can stoke some fires and the cry for liberty. Because things have gotten so bad that people who said, well, I'm not going to be involved, are now all of a sudden saying, you know, I'm going to have to. So we need to start educating people. And if you're like, I'm not articulate, bring them to the meetings where the different speakers, me or other people, where they can start getting them. So education. And then communication. We've got to start communicating because the mainstream media and the politicians are in bed together, and we've got to be able to go somewhere to get information we can trust, whether that's through free speech, social media sites, or something else. And number 3, we need to get you people into office, because we've got a lot of people in there right now. If you can't make them see the light, make them feel the heat. And we need to have more primaries in Kentucky this coming next year than they've ever had in Kentucky's history. And let them realize you will answer to the people. Because there's a lot of them up there haven't had a primary for 30 years. And they don't really care how many people call. So educate, communicate, and get in office. Yes, sir.
The first thing people ask me is, what political office should I run for? School board.
Yes.
Amen.
That is right now, all politics is local. Our schools have been hijacked for generations. And You've got to get us, it's gonna take a long time to straighten it out.
Mhm.
You've got to get on school boards and take over the operation of picking out the books and making sure that the propaganda is left-wing Marxist.
Yeah.
If you think prayer doesn't work, try running a sheriff's office without it.
I've already said, as long as there's pop quizzes, there will always be prayers.
Hey, I got notice as I was coming in, 208 did pass. House Bill 208, which is going to keep in-person learning down in public schools till the 29th of March, and then restricted to 2 days a week. However, he came this year to collect.
And if you look at the results right now, the Kentucky Department of Education has said, we do not want to comply with the standardized testing that we have to do every year. You know why? Because it's gonna prove that the results of their program are abysmal failures. And that's why they don't want it on record how bad that it's been. So yeah, another great failure. Our kids have lost a year and they're about to lose a second year. Word is. Any other questions? Yes, sir.
You know, I just wondered, you know, that's been a real threat, you know, with it, and they keep pushing this 1619 project to put this guilt and so forth. I don't know if there's any attempt to try to overthrow that somehow. I've been trying to fish around for any information on it to see if it can be stopped, because, you know, they're taking away civics and everything out of these schools, and they're, you know, we're trying to rewrite history with this project,
Right.
you know.
It used to be civics, and then it was social studies. And there's a lot of socialism in social studies. And now they're wanting to water down that. I do not know of a movement right now to do that.
Well, there's the 1776 project that President Trump had on the White House in the day that Weist said he wiped it off. But there are still people behind that, and one of them is it's the Woodson Center, Bob Woodson. He's a black man who's promoting that because he says the 1619 project is a lie, and it actually just hurts not just the African Americans, but he said it specifically hurts black people to think of themselves as being enslaved.
Right.
So he's actually pushing that. So if you looked at his website, which he's out of Virginia, I'm pretty sure, it's called the Woodson Project. He's trying to push the 1776 project.
And that's something we need to do, speaking about black people. We need to get more black people into our movement. There are black conservatives.
Yes, sir.
Our former Lieutenant Governor, Janine Hampton,
Yes,
who was a great champion of liberty.
yes,
All right, she was a black Tea Party leader in Warren County.
yep.
And I was sitting at lunch with her one day at the Capitol building, and we were talking to one, I forget if it was the Herald Liar or the Lexington Herald Leader. And they said, she's like, you never do an article about me. He's like, you do not exist. You are a black Tea Party woman, you do not exist to us, we will never run your picture. And there's so many Kentuckians have no idea that
And that's not racist.
Oh, that's not racist at all. By the way, nobody drink Coca-Cola, all right? Can I get somebody to crack that door back here, or maybe this one, it's starting to get real high. I don't know if I'm, hot air or what, but it's starting to get real warm.
Yeah, that's right.
Any other questions that I can answer before we get into any other things?
Can I ask you something that
Yes,
might
ma'am.
be out of place, but about QAnon?
I don't know anything
You
about
don't
it. I
know
mean,
anything?
I know
I've been
there's this
following
post.
a lot.
People think maybe it's Trump. I don't know.
Okay, we just gotta wait till tomorrow and see what happens.
We'll see what happens. I don't have any inside knowledge. The only thing that I maybe have a little insight is Kentucky stuff, and so that's way above my pay grade. Anything else?
One quick question.
Yes, sir.
Is this your wife here?
This is my lovely wife, Christine.
Well, I just wanted to make, women are extremely important in politics today
Yes.
and in government. And your wife, I know my wife, is the smartest move I ever made.
Amen.
And we should,
Every wise husband just said, amen. She's going like this.
well, sometimes we can forget the importance of them in the political structure and in what happens. And when you look at the teachers today of America, a large percentage of them are women. And having taught myself, and also having been elected the last superintendent of education for the state of Kentucky back in 1992, a gentleman on the phone the other day was talking to me from Florida, and I told him how long I'd been involved, and he said, what's the most significant change that you've seen in all your lifetime. And I said, unfortunately, it was when we took prayer and the Ten Commandments and Bible reading out of our schools.
Don't forget corporal punishment.
Well, I can tell you something about corporal punishment too. When Reuben Hinsdale taught me the meaning of the word restitution, he said, sit down there, John, on the bench. I'd done something I shouldn't have done. About 2 hours later, he came through and saw me sitting there, Chuck, and he said, we're going to discuss restitution. I thought, what the heck's he talking about? Resting on his bench? So he took me in the the principal's office, opened up the file drawer, pulled out this big board, and he said, bend over the desk, Johnny. He whacked me with that thing about 3 times, and I've never forgot the meaning of the word restitution my entire life. And sometimes we need a little discipline. And but I just wanted to mention your wife here, because we oftentimes, us men, forget the most important ingredient. And God gave us man, and he gave us women. And we need to really be cognizant of that fact. They are a vital source of education and strength.
It's very true. In the Bible, remember, in the book of Judges, there's a lady named Deborah. And she was there because no man was going to stand up. So maybe you ladies need to run for one of these offices.
Absolutely.
Anything, because there's no man who's willing to do it. Yes, ma'am.
I was a former teacher at one time, and I first started teaching in 1970. And when I started teaching, it was pretty much like I graduated from high school in 65. So it was pretty much the same. It was in 1970 when I first started teaching. The parents and the teacher, the parents and the school cooperated for the benefit of the student. Well, moved around. My husband was in the Army, and we had children, and I was fortunate enough to stay home. When I went back to teaching, which was in 1982, it had all changed by that time. It was the parents against the school, and the kids were just left out in the cold, and it's just gotten worse.
Anything else? Before I turn back over to Mr. Hurd?
Well, I got one more thing. I don't know if I'm going to get a chance to sing my old Kentucky Home tonight or not, Walter. But if I do, I can say it then, but I want to say it now. As a former government teacher, advanced government teacher, this was a beautiful lesson in history right here from this gentleman. And I'm glad that I brought my camera along to film it, because I can assure you, on my website, which is on my YouTube site, which is Travels with John Stephenson, I'm the only living Kentuckian that's been in every single county in the state at least 5 times and filmed the history of all 120 counties, donated a set of the tapes to every county library in the state, and I'm posting all of those histories of every county on YouTube and on my Facebook page. And if you go there, this last week, one of my friends in the library posted all of the counties of northern Kentucky, including the overall history of Kentucky by Dr. Thomas Clark, who, by the way, was a good Christian man and lived to be 100. He spoke at many of my events, and he was one of my teachers, along with Dr. Talbert and Mr. Hinsdale's wife, Mrs. Hinsdale, who taught me history. And so kids will be able to see these tapes, whether you do it at home or whether they do it in the school with the school teachers. So if you got a school teacher, you can encourage them to use these tapes. Over 350 historians interviewed in front of their local courthouses in 1987 to give you a look at where we were and where we are.
Amen. Well, then let me leave you with my website. I'm very much against the mask mandate. Everybody's getting rid of it. We're still saying it. If you go to my website, godandcountryministry.com, there's a page called Resources, and I've uploaded a trifold that feel free to print as many as you want, called Top 10 Reasons You Shouldn't Wear Masks. So I hope that's a blessing. Thank you, Eric, for the time.
Thank you very much.
Well, probably tell he's in good favor with the governor. Got a few other people here like that too. don't know if the next speaker, Chris, needs any introduction. Does everyone know who Chris Weist is? Chris. Back a year ago, when all this was starting, when the governor shut down the churches for Easter service, and well, PJ Roberts back there was a plaintiff, and Chris filed a lawsuit against the governor because of those restricting those masses or the services. The governor called that appalling. Chris called that a good start. So we'll talk a little more about that.
So yeah, we can talk about all of the federal cases first, and then we can talk about some state cases. We've been very busy on the COVID front with the governor. I'm going to throw some hate at the legislature.